No one dared to talk back to the rude billionaire who once made an entire restaurant tremble, until the new waitress stood tall and answered him back right in the middle of his fury. No one expected that just a few seconds later, she would be the one to make him bow his head in silence. Tuesday evening, the Golden Spoon restaurant was like a glittering stage awaiting a storm. Under the pale gold crystal chandeliers, the staff moved as silently as the wind, their faces taut. No one spoke, but everyone knew. Mr. Jonathan Blake was about to arrive. That name made the entire kitchen hold its breath. The mogul of international logistics, wealthy, powerful, and notorious for his volatile temper. Stories circulated. He once fired a waiter for pouring wine at the wrong temperature and made a chef write a formal report because a knife wasn't placed at the correct angle. From the manager to the busboy, everyone knew. Tuesday was Blake's night, and whoever drew the short straw to serve him was walking into the Dragon's Den. Behind the bar, Emily Carter was checking her silverware tray for the third time. She had only been working here for 2 weeks, just long enough to understand the importance of every smile and every step. But her heart carried worries far greater than a demanding customer. Her mother was hospitalized, and her younger sister, Lily, was preparing for final exams, but lacked the money to buy textbooks. Before leaving the locker room, Emily quietly taped a small photo of her mother onto the wardrobe mirror. A frail woman with a gentle smile who tried to hide her IV tube behind the blanket. She gently touched the picture and whispered, "I'll do well, Mom." Tonight, she only hoped for a peaceful shift to earn a little extra money for the hospital bills. But fate had other plans. In the frantic kitchen, Manager Peterson's voice boomed, "All right, who drew the short straw for table 7 tonight?" All eyes exchanged silent glances. The toothpicks were distributed, and when Emily opened her hand, the shortest one lay still in her palm. The air froze. Peterson sighed. "That's you, Carter. Stay calm. Remember the rules. No unnecessary talk, no arguing back, and don't show fear." Emily swallowed hard and nodded. "Yes, Mr. Peterson." She walked out into the dining room, where Jonathan Blake was seated in a secluded corner by the window. The light caught his silver-streaked hair and his perfectly tailored black suit, giving him an imposing yet cold demeanor. He didn't look around, merely swirling the scotch in his hand as if calculating every movement in the world. Emily took a deep breath, adjusted her apron, and approached. "Good evening, Mr. Blake," she said, her voice quiet but clear. Blake looked up slowly. His eyes were dark, still, and sharp as steel. "New employee, are you?" His voice was deep and husky. "I hope you understand that here, imperfection always comes at a price." Emily's heart pounded, but she kept her voice calm. "Yes, sir. I'm Emily Carter. I've been thoroughly trained and will serve you attentively." A tense silence stretched, so long she could hear the wall clock ticking. Then Blake gave a thin, knife-like smile. "Good. Then I want a ribeye steak, well done, cooked beyond medium well, and a separate bowl of lemon juice. Absolutely no pulp." Emily wrote carefully, bowing slightly. "Yes, sir." Not fear, just focus. For her, this was not just an order, it was an opportunity. As she turned away, Peterson at the back counter hissed through gritted teeth, "Be careful, Carter." He doesn't like people answering back. Emily paused for a beat, then smiled faintly, saying softly, as if only to herself, "It's okay. I just need to do it right." She tightened her grip on the notepad and stepped into the kitchen. The smell of grilling smoke and the cold metallic tang of the steel stoves hit her. But Emily only had one thought. If she did well tonight, she would have more money for her mother. She didn't know that this dinner would change her entire life. They said, No one had the courage to stand before Jonathan Blake until tonight, when a small waitress dared to look him straight in the eye without bowing her head. Despite Peterson's warning, Emily Carter's concern wasn't Jonathan Blake's rudeness, but her own hands, whether she could carry out the odd request perfectly. She backed away from table 7, her heart pounding, each step seeming like a run for the kitchen. The soft music outside faded, replaced by the sizzling of hot pans, the sound of knives hitting cutting boards, and the smell of butter melting in the smoke. "Antoine, here's the order for table 7. She handed over the note. Antoine, the French chef, a large figure with a smoky beard, looked up at her. He was busy seasoning the sauce, his eyes narrowing as he read Emily's shaky handwriting. Beef perfectly done, better than medium. Lemonade, alone. Antoine raised his eyebrows slightly, no longer shouting as usual. More than medium well done? Little girl, if you do as I say, the meat will turn to stone. His voice was no longer harsh, but deep and tired. The man who had witnessed dozens of employees collapse because of rich customers spoke softly and painfully. Emily bit her lip, her hands tightening on the note. I know, but if I make a mistake, I will lose my job. Please help me, just this once. Antoine looked at her for a long time, then sighed softly. Miss Carter, he said slowly, in this place, people don't cook to fill their stomachs, but to satisfy the emotions of those who are too full. But you're different. You cook to live. He put the note down on the steel table, brushing away some of the spilled salt. Okay, I'll do it. Not for him, but for you. He signaled the kitchen assistant to prepare. His experienced hands moved calmly. The beef was well marinated, slow-cooked to the point where every fibre contracted, dry but not burnt. Meanwhile, Emily squeezed the lemon, drop by drop, through the fine cheesecloth, so carefully that her fingers reddened from rubbing against the rim of the glass. She strained it again, then set the small bowl next to the ice glass, the light reflecting off it, making the surface sparkle. No seeds, no pulp, no scratches, she said to herself, like a mantra. Antoine nodded as she checked one last time. Go, girl. And if he yells, let me hear it. I can handle yelling better than you. The remark, half joking, half protective, made Emily smile slightly. In the smoky kitchen, she realized there were rough men with hearts softer than butter in a pan. The dining room was silent, like a theatre before a performance. Emily approached table 7, her breath held tight. She placed the bowl of lemon juice down first, then the steak plate. Every movement was slow and steady, like a ceremonial offering. Jonathan Blake still sat facing the window. Only when she set the dish down did he lift his chin, his dark eyes glancing over the plate. No praise, no frown, just a nearly imperceptible nod. He cut a piece. The sound of the knife against the plate was dry, like metal dropping onto ice. Emily stood still, gripping her service tray until her knuckles were white. She didn't dare look, only listened to the slow, steady chewing, as if someone was testing her patience. Blake took a sip of the lemon juice. No grimace. He said nothing. Then he continued eating. A few minutes passed, stretching into hours. Finally, he put his knife down, pushed his napkin aside, and stood up. Not a single word was spoken. He simply left the bill on the table, signed quickly, left his gold-plated pen behind, then exited the restaurant, his gait so calm it was as if no one had ever been there. Emily exhaled, nearly collapsing onto a chair. Peterson approached, quietly asking, "Are you okay?" "I think it's done," she replied softly, her voice shaky, as if she had just escaped a storm. She cleared the table, folding the linen. But when she picked up the bill, her eyes froze. A number was written there, a $1,000 tip. Emily was stunned. Her hands trembled, the thin paper nearly slipping from the clip. Brenda, a co-worker on the same shift, saw it and gasped quietly, loud enough to echo in the room. "Oh my God, he left $1,000. Peterson grabbed the bill, squinting to read it. At the end of the scrawled signature, a small line was written in blue ink. "You didn't apologize." No one spoke. The words cut through the space like a thin blade. Brenda stammered. "What does he mean?" "He tipped you for not apologizing to him." Emily didn't answer. She looked down at the bill, dozens of emotions churning inside her. Part of it was relief, part confusion, and the rest, doubt. She moved to the corner of the counter, avoiding curious eyes. The photo of her mother in the locker room flashed in her mind. "If I have more money, Mum will have more medicine." The thought echoed, causing her to clutch the receipt to her chest. This amount was enough to cover nearly all of this month's hospital bill, enough for her mother to receive additional treatment. But why did he do it? Emily looked around the brightly lit room, the glittering crystal glasses, the stylish people, the shallow laughter. It all suddenly felt alien. "Is he testing me to see if I'll crumble before the money?" she wondered. Her heart felt heavy. The generosity wasn't just a reward. It felt like a massive question mark, forcing her to look within. Between pride and survival, what would she choose? She walked to the glass door, looking out at the street. Outside, Jonathan Blake's sleek black Rolls-Royce was merging into the night traffic. Red lights reflected on the raindrops sliding down the glass. Emily stood there for a long time, her heartbeat sinking with the sound of the rain. Something had just begun, quietly, but certainly. She didn't know that tonight. Mr. Blake didn't just leave money. He left a riddle that could change her entire life. The big question about Jonathan Blake's tip and riddle followed Emily Carter all week. The massive tip significantly alleviated her family's financial burden, but it also created an invisible pressure. Was she trading her self-respect for survival? Emily knew she couldn't turn away from this opportunity, no matter how dangerous it was. She had become the center of attention and the target of jealousy in the restaurant. The following week, promptly at 7:30 p.m. on Tuesday, the man of shadow reappeared in the dining room. The Rolls-Royce pulled up, and without needing to draw straws, Gregory Miller, the restaurant owner, sighed and announced. Jonathan Blake had requested to be served by Ms. Carter, making everyone sigh softly. This was no longer a coincidence, but an unspoken pact between the shark and the new waitress. Emily approached the confrontation with a completely different mindset than before. She was no longer carefree. She was mentally prepared to face irrational challenges. The wager between her and Mr. Blake became routine. He occasionally issued requests so novel they bordered on the absurd. This week, he demanded his cocktail be made with herbs harvested within the last 4 hours, or he requested she change the lighting at the next table because the warm glow affected the color of his dish. Emily quietly handled everything. She coordinated with Antoine and the staff to create the most perfect, almost surreal, service conditions. She increasingly transformed into a discreet expert at reading his moods. She realized that Blake didn't need service. He needed absolute control, a form of stability in a world he perceived as chaotic. A silent, if existing, rapport gradually formed between them. He called her simply Carter. She replied very politely, "Mr. Blake." Not a smile, not a word of small talk, but by the end of nearly every meal, he never forgot the enormous tip. Within a few months, Emily had become the restaurant's highest earner. The money helped her pay off old debts, buy Lily a laptop to pursue her college dreams, and start saving. Her family's hardship was significantly lessened. One Tuesday evening, as Emily was stepping into the private area of table 7 to check everything before Blake arrived, the phone in her apron pocket vibrated violently. It was Lily, her sister. Emily knew she shouldn't answer, but her perpetual anxiety about her mother made her ignore the rule. She tucked herself into a hidden corner behind the bar, holding the phone to her ear. Lily's voice was tearful, stripped of its usual innocence. Sis, Mum isn't doing well. The hospital just called." Lily sobbed, her voice cracking. "They said the new experimental drug, the Vesper drug, is out of stock. We need to pay cash immediately to buy the new batch, or Mum will have to stop the regimen by the end of the week. Sis, the amount is over our card limit. We don't have enough money for the medicine. Mum will have to stop treatment." The shock hit Emily, squeezing her heart. It wasn't the old bill. Her mother's future was immediately at stake. Everything danced before her eyes, her mother trying to force a smile, hoping for a small dream. Now it could all shatter just because of a lack of cash. Wiping away tears quickly, Emily tried to suppress her fear. "It's okay, Lily. I'll handle it. I believe I'll find a way," she whispered, trying to keep her voice calm. She had to rush back to the dining room. Just as she stepped out of the secluded corner, she suddenly saw Jonathan Blake standing under the dim yellow light near the restroom door. He was on the phone, his back to her. When Blake ended the call, he turned back, his eyes not meeting Emily's, but there was a fleeting look of deep contemplation. Emily had a hunch he might have overheard everything. A strange tension enveloped the entire evening. Blake returned to his table, cancelled the ordered steak, and requested a glass of cold water instead of scotch. He ate more silently than usual, didn't talk at all, and only left after a slight tap of his credit card to pay the bill. The meal ended. Emily silently cleaned up. This time, Blake still left a large tip, but there was no message. Emily stared at Mr. Blake's empty leather chair. He heard, "My deepest fear," she thought. She knew that tonight, Blake's game of control had escalated to a different level, and she could no longer hide her greatest weakness. Her mother's fate now depended on her ability to keep her job and the peculiar generosity of this billionaire. After the tense Tuesday night, Emily Carter barely slept. The fear of losing her mother due to the lack of the experimental treatment, the Vesper drug, weighed heavily on her. However, 2 days later, as Emily was at home trying to search for financial aid programs online, her phone rang. This time, it wasn't Lily, but a professional and sharp female voice. "Emily Carter, may I speak with you? I'm Catherine Pierce, Senior Counsel at Pierce, Davies & Grant. I am contacting you regarding the purchase of the Vesper drug for your mother." Emily was startled. Catherine Pierce? This was one of New York's top corporate law firms, completely unrelated to individual medical cases. "We have been authorized by an anonymous benefactor," Catherine continued. "This benefactor has paid the full cost for the Vesper drug. The batch will be delivered to Mrs. Laura's hospital within the next few hours, and the experimental treatment costs will be covered by us for the next 6 months. You no longer need to worry about the expenses." Emily was speechless, feeling dizzy. Who was this kind stranger? She couldn't stop thinking about Jonathan Blake, the man who had overheard her desperate conversation and always found a way to generously compensate for imperfection. She held Catherine's business card in her hand and told herself, there was an invisible link between Blake and this salvation. The following week, exactly at the moment Mr. Blake appeared, Emily approached the table to serve him as usual. He was sitting there, unusually, with a glass of clear water instead of scotch in front of him. When she placed the fragrant cup of coffee on the table as requested at the end of the meal, Blake suddenly looked up. His pale eyes radiated the first genuine sincerity Emily had ever seen. "Carter," he said, using her last name for the first time with a more familiar tone. "Well done." Emily was surprised but responded politely, "Mr. Blake, I know you took care of everything." He gave a slight nod, his gaze softening. Her voice trembled with emotion, but she maintained her professionalism. I know you helped my family. Your lawyer is very good. My mother received the medicine in time. You gave her hope. Blake's voice softened further. No need for thanks, Miss Carter. It's about providing the tools to balance the playing field when the system knocks you down. He smiled faintly for the first time in years, a bitter but sincere smile. You are the first person I've met in years who wasn't afraid. You saw the man behind the facade, he said quietly. Frankly, I have a proposition, Miss Carter. Emily's eyes widened, her heart pounding. Mr. Blake continued seriously. I am establishing the Blake Lillian Charity Foundation to help people in circumstances similar to yours, those who have been crushed by the system. I need someone with integrity, resilience, and the courage to face pressure. I want you to be the chief executive officer. The offer was too immense, exceeding all of Emily's imagination. She couldn't believe her ears. Emily took a step back, her eyes skeptical. Mr. Blake, I am very grateful for your generosity and kindness. But I can't accept, Blake frowned. Why? I am just a server, sir, Emily said, her voice shaking with self-doubt. I don't have a management degree. I have no experience running a charity foundation. I haven't even graduated from community college. I can't handle such an important position. Blake stared at her, the icy look fleetingly returning. But this time, it was determination, not cruelty. Miss Carter, a degree is something that can be bought. But courage, resilience, and the ability to read a situation under pressure, those are things you possess that no one on Wall Street can buy. I've observed you for months. You dared to face me. You dared to fight for your family. I don't need someone with experience. I need someone with character. He placed his hand on the table. Think carefully. I won't accept an immediate refusal. This is an opportunity for you not only to save your mother, but to save hundreds of others. Let me know next week. Emily stood silent, her chest filled with conflicting emotions. She was still a waitress, but now she held the key to a vast future. She bowed her head. Yes, Mr. Blake. I will think about it. On Friday evening, the Golden Spoon was empty of guests. The white linen-covered tables lay silent, as if resting after a long night of service. Emily Carter returned to the restaurant after her shift, following an urgent message from Gregory Miller. Her boss's voice still echoed in her ear. Carter, you need to come right away. Someone wants to see you, and I think you should hear what she has to say. When Emily walked in, the lights in the main hall had been dimmed just enough for cleaning. A woman was standing next to the bar, her back straight, her posture commanding. Her perfectly tailored black suit reflected the light like a subtle blade. Catherine Pierce. Emily instantly recognized her, a face she had seen in finance magazines, where she was nicknamed the Black Panther of Wall Street. She turned when she heard the door close, the smile on her lips not quite reaching her eyes. Miss Carter, Catherine said softly, but every syllable felt like a steel-tipped thread. I'm glad you came. I don't like dealing through intermediaries. Emily tightened the strap of her bag, standing a few steps away from her. I thought you were Mr. Blake's person. Catherine gave a slight laugh. Him? Number. Jonathan Blake and I are two parallel lines. We move together, but never touch, and I am not here on anyone's behalf. She placed her handbag on the counter and pulled out a thick envelope. I came to warn you. Emily frowned slightly. Warn me? You are being pulled into a game you don't understand, Catherine said, her voice not loud, just steady and sharp like metal. I know about the Blake Lillian Foundation. I know he invited you to be the CEO. And I also know You have never studied management, never signed a major financial contract. She paused, tilting her head. Why do you think he chose you? Emily kept her voice steady, perhaps because he sees something in me that others don't. Naivete, Catherine smiled, almost pityingly. Sweetheart, I met Jonathan Blake before you were born. I know that man better than he knows himself. He doesn't trust anyone, and he doesn't help anyone without a reason. Emily remained silent. For a moment, she could hear her own heartbeat clearly. Catherine slowly stepped closer. Your mother is being treated with the Vesper drug, correct? Emily flinched, taking half a step back. How do you know? Because I was the one who paid for that batch of medicine, Catherine said softly, but it was enough to freeze the space between them. Not Blake. Me. Emily stared at her, confused. You're lying. Your lawyer. Is my lawyer? Yes. You received the medicine because I wanted you to. I didn't do it out of kindness. I wanted to prove that Blake is not your only benefactor. She paused, her voice dropping significantly. Sweetheart, sometimes kindness is the most beautiful restraint. The statement landed, heavy as a verdict. You think Blake is helping you out of humanitarian concern? Catherine continued slowly. No, he's trying to replace what he lost, his wife and daughter. You are just a new shadow in an old lesson. I came to cut that string before it tightens around you. Emily felt a lump in her throat. All her thoughts clashed. Gratitude, confusion, and a feeling of deep insult. You can believe what you want, but I won't let anyone decide for me, she said, her voice shaky but resolute. Catherine observed her, her expression still composed. A pity. I thought you were smart enough to realize I wasn't joking. She placed the envelope on the counter. In here is enough money for you and your mother to leave New York and live comfortably for the rest of your lives. Don't get involved with the Blake Lillian Foundation. If you agree to work for him, I will have your mother's entire treatment cost audited. And you will have to pay back every penny silence, only the ticking of the clock and the light rain tapping against the glass. Emily looked at the thick envelope on the counter, like a bullet wrapped in white paper. You want me to be your pawn, to fight against him? Catherine gave a thin smile. I just want you to choose the right side. And trust me, my side always wins. Emily backed away, her voice small but every word clear. No, I choose myself. Catherine raised an eyebrow, her eyes icy. You will regret it. She turned and strode toward the door, but just then a familiar deep voice echoed from the dark hallway. Morgan, you still haven't changed. Catherine froze. Jonathan Blake appeared in the dim light, neither rushed nor angry. His gaze was steady and calm, as if everything she had said was just wind. Catherine turned around, the smile returning to her lips, but unable to hide a hint of fear in her eyes. Jonathan, I suppose this girl called you Blake, replied slowly, his voice even and deep. No. I came because Gregory said the restaurant had an intruder after closing hours. I didn't expect to find you. They looked at each other, two people who were once friends, once rivals, now like two remnants of the same tragedy. You still use others as tools, Blake said, his eyes glancing toward Emily. But this time, Morgan, you chose the wrong person. Catherine remained silent for a few seconds, then shrugged. We both know that in the game of power, the weak one loses. Good luck, Jonathan. She turned, left the hall, the sound of her heels fading into the darkness. Blake stood still for a long time, saying nothing. When the door closed, he merely exhaled softly. Are you okay, Carter? Emily nodded, but her voice trembled. She said she was the one who bought the medicine for my mother. Is that true? Blake looked out the glass door. The rain was falling silently on the street. Yes, but not out of kindness. Catherine wanted you to be indebted to her so she could manipulate me. I didn't think she would go that far. He turned to Emily, his gaze stern but warm. Now you see clearly, Carter. Not everyone who offers a hand wants to save you. Some hands only want to pull others down with them. Emily nodded softly, her heart mixing fear and empathy. For the first time, she saw the true loneliness in Jonathan Blake's eyes, the pain that Catherine had unintentionally rekindled. Outside, the rain fell harder. Two people stood silent by the empty bar, one who had lost faith in the world, the other learning how to hold on to it. Catherine left, but the secret she left behind remained, and Emily understood that from this moment on, she was not just the chosen one. She had become the target. The silence in the Golden Spoon was now heavier than the thunder outside. Jonathan Blake's accusation that Catherine Pierce was involved in his wife's death was like a knife slicing through the facade. Catherine could no longer maintain her composure. She flinched, her face paling. "You're insane, Blake," Catherine stammered. Her voice no longer held power, but trembled, as if afraid of what she had just heard. Then she turned and walked away, not forgetting to knock over a small crystal vase on the counter. When the door closed, only the soft sound of rain hitting the window pane remained. Blake stood still, his shoulders still taut like an over-tightened wire. Emily felt her heart race, not just from fear, but from the realization that he carried a pain deeper than anger. "Mr. Blake," she began softly, hesitantly. "Your wife? Is that true?" Blake didn't answer immediately. He signaled for Gregory and Peterson to clear the staff from the hall. When the kitchen door closed, only the two of them remained in the vast room. "No interruptions," he said quietly, then turned and walked toward the balcony. Outside, the rain began to pour, thin, cold drops falling onto his suit shoulders, spreading into blurred streaks. The city lights reflected on his face, revealing deep eyes, clouded with a sadness like ash. Emily stood still. She hesitated for a few seconds, then slowly stepped out. She said nothing, just stood one step away from him, close enough for him to know she was there, far enough to maintain respect. Blake didn't turn around, but his voice rang out, husky and deep. "You know now, Carter. I once had a family. Lillian, my wife, and Olivia, my daughter. They were my reason for living." He paused, his eyes fixed on the distance, where the buildings blurred in the rain. Then one afternoon, they left the house to go to the airport. They never came back. Emily held her breath. The rain fell harder, each drop tapping lightly on the metal railing. Blake continued, his voice heavy. "Catherine Pierce's company was responsible for the traffic control system at the time. A technical error, just one, caused a truck to lose control. I couldn't prove she did it intentionally, but I knew she exploited that tragedy to seize my contracts, to push me into a corner." He stopped, his hands gripping the railing tightly. "Losing them, I lost all faith in kindness. I thought this world only operated by cruelty. From then on, I started testing everyone, to see who would fall and who would dare to stand tall." Emily listened in silence. The rain wet her hair. Washing away with the droplets was profound pity. She didn't interrupt, letting his voice blend with the sound of the rain, each sentence like a cut, opening the deepest part of the man who once made the entire restaurant tremble. After a moment, Blake turned back. His eyes held an emotion she had never seen before, no longer pride, but vulnerability. "Then you came along, Carter. A small girl who didn't know who I was, completely unafraid. You dared to face me, dared to speak with respect, not fear. I didn't expect that." He hesitated, looked down at his own hands, then continued, his voice slower, softer. "You made me realize that sometimes control is not strength, but fear. You don't know that you saved me from myself." "Carter." Emily bowed her head, her voice catching. "I didn't do anything, sir. I just did my job." Blake smiled faintly, a rare and genuine smile. Sometimes just maintaining decency in a world that has become hardened is extraordinary. Then he slowly stepped closer, looking directly at her. "Catherine paying for your mother's medicine. That was a strategic move. She wanted to turn you into a tool, to manipulate me. But you didn't let her. And that is what makes me believe you are the only one strong enough to help me find justice." He took a deep breath, his voice deepening. "I don't need a foundation director with a degree. I need an ally, someone who sees the light, even in the midst of darkness. Miss Carter, are you willing to join me?" Emily looked at him, her heart in turmoil. The rain was still falling, but she no longer felt cold. She understood. He didn't just need help, he needed a reason to believe in humanity again. She nodded softly, her voice resolute yet warm. "Yes, Mr. Blake. I agree. Not for the title, but because I believe you deserve to be forgiven, the way you gave me faith." A strange silence enveloped them. Blake looked at her, said nothing more, and just nodded very slowly. On the balcony of the Golden Spoon, amidst the rain-streaked city lights, two people stood side by side. One, who had just recovered, lost faith. One, who had just found her first mission in life. Sometimes, confessions are not made in a church, but in the rain, where two souls silently see each other. After the confession in the rain, everything within Emily Carter changed. Not loudly, not boastfully, but like an old wound being stitched up with the thread of trust. From that moment, Jonathan Blake no longer saw her as a small waitress, but as a companion, and Emily, though not yet accustomed to her new role, felt a fire ignited within her. She wanted to help him confront the past, to prove that kindness could be stronger than power. The next morning, as the early sun streamed through the small window of her old Brooklyn apartment, Emily sat silently before the mirror. She neatly brushed her hair, but her hands were still trembling. On the chair lay her old apron with faded coffee stains, the garment that had accompanied her through countless long shifts. Next to it was a pale blue suit that Blake had sent, along with a handwritten card. "Carter, don't change your nature, just change the jacket." She picked up the card and smiled faintly. The smile was mixed with anxiety. In the mirror, she saw two parallel images, a humble server and a woman preparing to enter a new world. She touched the collar of the suit jacket, taking a deep breath. "I won't let fear decide my future," she told herself. Midday, she arrived at Jonathan Blake's office on Park Avenue. The space was bright, quiet, and luxurious, a stark contrast to her days standing in the kitchen heat. Blake was waiting for her by the window. He wasn't holding his usual Scotch glass, but a steaming cup of black tea. He placed a thick folder in front of her. "These are all the documents for the Blake Lillian Foundation," he said slowly. "From today, you represent not only me, but also those who have been harmed by this system. But Catherine Pierce won't back down easily. She will attack what you believe is your weakness." Emily looked at him, her eyes steady. "My lack of experience?" Blake nodded softly, his gaze softening. "You are intelligent, but humble. That is something Catherine lacks. I believe you will make her misjudge you." She replied quietly. "I can't learn high-level management in a few days, but I know how to stay calm under pressure." Let's announce the foundation at the place where it all began. The Golden Spoon. Blake raised an eyebrow. The place where she insulted you? It's also where I learned that self-respect can make a person stronger than power, she said. Blake looked at her for a long time, then smiled. Carter, you've just turned pain into strength. I can't teach you that. But I know. I can trust you. In the following days, Emily worked tirelessly. In the mornings, she still went to the restaurant as usual, maintaining a normal appearance. In the afternoons, she was at Blake's office, reading every line of the documents, marking suspicious points in the charities run by Catherine. Every night, she brought documents home, sitting by her small window, the yellow light shining on her tired but brightly determined face. Peterson, the floor manager, sometimes stopped by after closing. He saw her sitting and taking notes, her eyes focused, and quietly said, Carter, some people are born to serve, and some serve to change the world. I think you are the second kind. His words made her eyes tear up. On Saturday, Emily went to see Gregory Miller, the restaurant owner. Mr. Miller, she said, I want to host the foundation's announcement right here next Tuesday evening. Nothing loud. Just have Catherine present, and everyone will see the truth. Gregory looked at her, both worried and admiring. Are you planning to turn the Golden Spoon into a battlefield? No, Emily replied softly. I want to turn it into a place where justice is found. Gregory was silent for a moment, then nodded. Then we will do it with you. Tuesday evening arrived. The New York sky covered with thick clouds, light rain falling. Emily stood before the mirror, adjusting her collar. She looked at the blue suit, then at her old apron. Two worlds. One was past. One was unfolding before her. She pinned a small white rose brooch that Blake had given her. I won't forget who I was, she whispered. When Emily stepped into the Golden Spoon, the atmosphere was different from usual. Gone was the lively chatter of the elite, replaced by silent anticipation. Under the warm, yellow light, Blake stood ready in the main hall. He was not seated at table 7 as usual. Today, he stood beside her. There was no longer a distance between the billionaire and the server. There were just two people. One who had lost faith, and one who was helping him find it again. Exactly at 8 o'clock, the restaurant door opened. Catherine Pierce walked in wearing a luxurious black suit, the strong scent of her perfume preceding her. Her eyes swept over the crowd and landed on Emily. A sneer appeared on her lips. Oh, you're still here. I thought you would have realized you're not suited for big games. Emily kept her voice composed. I never run away, Miss Pierce. Really? Catherine narrowed her eyes, her voice full of sarcasm. How is your mother? Do you think a newly established charity can afford her medicine? The room fell silent. Emily looked straight at her, her eyes unwavering. You don't need to worry. My mother is fine, but I think today you are the one who needs to worry. She took a thick envelope from her pocket and placed it on the nearest table. These are documents proving that your company manipulated insurance firms to prevent dozens of patients, including my mother, from receiving treatment with the Vesper drug. A murmur spread throughout the restaurant. Catherine maintained her composure, but her hand clenched her handbag. A waitress talking about justice. How amusing, Emily replied softly. I'm just reminding you that true kindness doesn't need a lawyer to protect it. Blake stepped forward, his voice deep and calm to the point of being frightening. Don't do that, Catherine. You should know when to stop. Everyone turned around. Blake had stepped forward, tall and imposing, his gaze so cold it seemed to drop the room's temperature. These documents, he said slowly, are copies from your own company. They show you manipulated shell charities to conceal money from fraudulent projects. And worse, You interfered with the insurance process for the Vesper drug, preventing dozens of patients, including Miss Carter's mother, from receiving treatment. Catherine's face suddenly paled, but she forced a cold smile. You're talking as if you have proof in your hands. We do, Blake signaled lightly. From the back of the room, a middle-aged man, thin and wearing glasses, walked out. It was Harrison Wells, the former chief financial officer of Pierce Global. He walked slowly, clearly not wanting to be the center of attention, but his eyes held a quiet courage. "Miss Pierce," Emily said, her voice steady and calm. "Mr. Wells came to the Blake Lillian Foundation last week. He wanted to tell the story you forced him to keep silent." Harrison Wells swallowed hard, his voice shaky but clear. "I worked for Miss Pierce. She forced me to sign fake documents, transferring money from medical funds to private accounts. When I refused, she threatened to ruin my family's life. I kept silent for 4 years. Until today." A low buzz spread across the room. A few regular guests of the Golden Spoon, people who had worked with Pierce, began whispering, uneasy. Catherine tried to regain her authority, but her voice choked. "You're all making this up." "Blake, you're fabricating a story to get revenge on me for the past," Blake replied softly, but his voice was hard as steel. "No, Catherine, I am doing something you will never understand. I am choosing justice instead of power." A profound silence fell. Emily looked straight at Catherine, no longer afraid. "You called me a cheap waitress," she said, her voice soft as a breeze. "But at least I don't use money to hurt others. You made my mother struggle between life and death, just to prove your power was absolute. But tonight, it is no longer." In that moment, Catherine Pierce was no longer the Iron Lady of Finance, but just a small person facing her own consequences. She looked around, seeing the faces that once admired her, now avoiding her gaze, and panic flashed in her eyes. Blake stepped closer, speaking softly, just loud enough for the two of them to hear. "You should leave, Catherine, before things get worse. You lost, not to me, but to yourself." Gregory Miller, the restaurant owner, approached, his demeanor calm and firm. "Ms. Pierce," he said, "the Golden Spoon welcomes everyone, but not those who bring deception. Please leave the premises." With no way out, Catherine turned around. The golden light reflected in her eyes, which were empty. As she walked away, the sound of her heels tapping on the stone floor echoed, like a farewell to the empire built on manipulation. The door closed behind her. No one spoke. Only the sound of the rain outside, steady, as if washing away the heavy atmosphere in the room. Emily stood still, her hand resting on the table edge where the envelope lay. Her heart pounded, but not from fear or triumph. She only felt an inexpressible sadness. Blake walked to her side, his gaze gentle. "Carter," he said, "justice sometimes doesn't bring joy, but it brings relief." Emily nodded softly. "I don't feel happy, Mr. Blake. I only feel pity, because perhaps somewhere inside her there was once a person who knew how to love, and then lost herself." Blake was silent. He looked at her, then out at the sky. The rain fell in silver streaks on the window pane, reflecting the warm light in the room. Gregory came closer, placing a hand on Emily's shoulder. "You did well, Carter," he said quietly. "Tonight, not just Blake, but this entire restaurant owes you a thank you." Emily smiled, faintly, but genuinely. Her eyes turned toward the door, where Catherine Pierce had left. A proud figure, now just a blur in the rain. She felt neither hatred nor arrogance. She only felt calm, as if she had just closed an old chapter of her life. Blake looked at her, his voice slightly husky but warm. "Carter, you just made me believe that kindness is never weakness. Thank you for fighting in a way that I couldn't. She turned to him, smiling gently. No, Mr. Blake. Thank you for daring to believe in someone like me. Under the crystal light, they stood side by side, not boss and employee, but two people who had just crossed the abyss of power to reclaim the humanity that had been forgotten. After Catherine Pierce was escorted out, the Golden Spoon felt as if it had escaped a storm. The heavy atmosphere that had lingered for months suddenly dispersed, leaving behind a strange resonance, relief, yet no one dared to believe it was truly over. Then someone began to applaud, slowly, hesitantly. Then the second, the third round of applause rang out. Before long, the entire room erupted into sustained applause. Not for a delicious dish, but for something much rarer. Justice had just been served. Peterson, the floor manager, came closer to Emily, his voice thick with emotion. Ms. Carter, you did something none of us dared to dream of. Thank you for saving this place, Brenda, and a few other colleagues rushed over and hugged her. Emily just smiled, unable to speak. After all the fear, she finally understood the warmth of human connection, a warmth that Catherine Pierce would never possess. In the distance, Jonathan Blake stood silently. He didn't speak, just nodded faintly, a smile touching the corner of his lips. His gaze was no longer that of a boss supervising staff, but of a witness to the growth of someone he trusted. That night, as the restaurant slowly emptied, Emily returned to clean table 7. The table that had once been a source of fear for every staff member now glowed in the warm yellow light. Jonathan Blake approached, signaling Antoine. No need for the well-done steak. No need for the vegetables lined up. Just make your best seared scallops. Antoine nodded, a rare smile appearing on his face that had been perpetually scowling for years. When he left, Blake pulled out a chair for Emily, saying softly, You should sit down, Carter. It's time we had dinner, like two normal people. They sat across from each other. Outside, the light rain fell on the window pane, the street lights spreading into soft bands of light. Emily placed her hands on the table, slightly trembling. Not from fear, but from emotion. Miss Carter, Blake began, his voice deep and warm, as if he had left all bitterness behind. You didn't just save the Golden Spoon. You saved me. You showed me Lillian, in a different way. Emily smiled gently. She and little Olivia would be very proud, sir, and I believe the Blake Lillian Foundation will be a place where they can smile in peace. Blake looked deeply into her eyes. You know, I once thought that only control allowed one to survive. I was afraid of losing anyone else, so I chose cruelty. But you showed me. Sometimes, the strongest thing is knowing how to forgive. And daring to trust again. The dinner was served. Seared scallops, golden brown, emitting a gentle aroma. For the first time, they ate a meal without any rules. No more titles, just quiet respect between two people who had crossed the darkness of power together. When Blake put his knife down, he said softly, Starting next week, you will officially be the CEO of the Blake Lillian Foundation. We have a lot of work to do, and many people who need help. I want this foundation to be a source of faith for those who have been desperate, just as you once were for your mother. Emily nodded, her eyes bright. I am ready, sir. But I have one request. Blake smiled. Tell me. I want to hold the Foundation's first press conference right here at the Golden Spoon. Not in a luxurious building, not on television. Here, where everyone witnessed something that seemed impossible, that justice and compassion can stand in the same place. Blake looked at her, his eyes full of pride. An excellent idea, Director Carter. Let me handle the rest. He placed his hand on hers, closing the distance between them. "You have changed this place, Carter. The Golden Spoon is no longer a stage for fear, but a place of hope." Emily smiled faintly, and in that smile was both gratitude and peace. Outside, the rain had stopped, the streetlights reflecting on the tabletop, shimmering like a new beginning. 3 days later, the Golden Spoon was brightly lit again. This time, there were no regular guests of Catherine Pierce, no VIP tables, only familiar faces: Antoine, Peterson, Brenda, Gregory, and the reporters who came to cover the event. Table 7 was placed in the center, transformed into a speaker's podium. Emily stepped up, wearing an elegant cream-colored suit. Before reaching the microphone, she took off her old name tag, Emily Carter, Waitress, from her lapel and placed it on table 7. The gesture silenced everyone. She gently touched the tag, then raised her head, her voice ringing out without amplification, just loud enough to settle into the hearts of the listeners. "I used to be afraid to speak up against power. But today, I understand that justice doesn't start with a voice, but with a heart that dares to speak. I was not born to be a hero. I was just a girl who wanted to protect her mother. But when I stood up, I realized, when we protect what is right, we are protecting ourselves." She paused, her eyes looking down at the front row, where Blake was sitting, smiling proudly. The Blake Lillian Foundation is not the end of a battle. It is the beginning of compassion. We will help those who have been harmed by injustice, those who have never had the chance to be heard, and if a small waitress can do it, anyone can. The entire room was silent for a few seconds, then erupted into applause. Peterson nodded, while Antoine quietly wiped his eyes. Gregory stood by the door, saying softly, "Now the Golden Spoon truly deserves its name." Blake walked onto the stage, said nothing, just took Emily's hand and raised it high. A simple moment, requiring no title. She bowed her head in thanks, her smile making everyone feel the truest light in the room. Not from crystal, but from faith rekindled. The press conference ended. As people slowly left, Emily turned back to look at her old name tag still resting on table 7. She gently touched it, smiling. Blake approached, standing next to her. "You don't need it anymore," he said. Emily replied, her voice soft as a breath. "I still need it, sir." To remember that every journey begins from a humble place. They walked out the door together. The afternoon light shone through the glass, illuminating their shoulders. Two people who had found peace in their own way. Outside, the streets were bustling, but in their hearts, there was only one feeling: rebirth. No longer fear, no longer hatred. Just the belief that, somewhere in this noisy world, courage can still create miracles. All great things start with ordinary hearts, daring to stand up, daring to speak, and daring to love. After the press conference to launch the Blake Lillian Foundation, Emily Carter's name was everywhere in the news. They called her by many titles: the Cinderella of Wall Street, the warrior for justice. Everyone admired her, telling the story of a waitress who dared to confront the elite. But in a world where light always accompanies darkness, victory is never the end. Jonathan Blake knew that. In the Foundation's office, he spoke to Emily in a deep, calm voice. "She was publicly humiliated, Carter. But Catherine Pierce never gives up. She will seek revenge, and this time, not with power, but with words." 3 days later, his fear came true. Emily opened her laptop in her small apartment, only to see a series of glaring headlines. Billionaire Jonathan Blake's waitress mistress? Charity foundation? Or cover-up for secret dealings? From server to CEO, a questionable leap. She sat silently, unable to read further. The bright blue screen reflected her stunned eyes. A cup of tea had long gone cold beside her. Every line was a small knife cutting into the self-respect she had tried so hard to maintain. When the door opened, Blake walked in, bringing the scent of hot coffee and his familiar composure. He placed the cup in front of her. "Drink it," he said. "You look like you've been through a war zone." Emily looked up, her voice husky. "People say I took advantage of you. They say I'm just playing the role of a poor girl who knows how to charm. I'm not used to this kind of war, Mr. Blake. I only know how to work hard." Blake sat down, his eyes looking straight at her, steady, but not cold. "Carter, this is the final move. Catherine is attacking the only weakness you still hold, your self-belief. Don't let her take that away." He took an old, worn phone from his jacket pocket and placed it on the table. "Do you know what this is?" Emily looked at him, shaking her head. "It's my phone, and inside is a recording," Blake said slowly. "It's Catherine Pierce's voice in a call many years ago, where she admits to forcing her subordinate to change the operational data, the cause of Lillian's accident." Emily was stunned. "I knew this before?" "I knew," he nodded, his voice hoarse. "But I didn't use it. I didn't want revenge. I once thought that if I lived more decently than her, that would be the victory. But now," he paused, his gaze softening, "you are the one who deserves to choose. You decide, release it or forgive." Emily was speechless. She reached out and touched the phone, feeling the coldness on her fingertips. A part of her wanted to end everything. But another part, the part Blake had awakened, said that justice didn't need anger. That evening, she sat alone in the office. The yellow light shone down on a white envelope that was already open. She held the phone in her hand for a long time. Then, with a soft exhale, she placed it into the envelope, as if laying down the last of her hatred. "Not for revenge," she whispered, "but for peace." The next morning, she sent the envelope to the federal prosecutor's office, along with a short letter. "I seek justice not for myself, but for those who lost the opportunity to live fairly." When Emily left the post office, it began to rain lightly. She looked up, the cold rain touching her skin, but her heart felt light, as if she had released a huge stone. A few days later, the news broke. Catherine Pierce was arrested. No more excuses were enough to hide the old crimes. The press reported the story, but this time, Emily Carter's name was mentioned not with scandal, but with admiration. A year passed. Spring returned to New York, and the Golden Spoon was bustling as before. The only difference was that the light in the restaurant seemed warmer, gentler. Emily was now the CEO of the Blake Lillian Foundation. The foundation had helped thousands of families overcome injustice in the healthcare system. Her mother, Mrs. Laura, had fully recovered. And Lily, her little sister from years ago, was now attending college, becoming Emily's greatest pride. And Jonathan Blake, the man who once made so many people tremble, was now a different man. He lived quietly, composedly, often coming to the Golden Spoon every Tuesday evening, no longer to issue orders, but to enjoy a simple dinner. That evening, when Emily walked into the restaurant, she wasn't wearing a suit, just a gentle blue dress. She walked to table 7, the place where she once nervously stood serving drinks, now the place where she confidently sat down. Blake looked up, smiling. "Good evening, Carter." "Good evening, Mr. Blake," she replied, with a gentle smile. "How are the scallops tonight?" "Excellent," he said, "but I think you are the one who makes them perfect." They both laughed. The laughter was soft, genuine, and peaceful. No more fear, no more power games. Blake looked at her, his eyes as warm as the crystal light on the ceiling. "You saved me from myself, Carter. You reminded me that a person can start over, no matter their age." Emily was silent, her throat suddenly catching. "And I," she said softly, only learned to believe that sometimes, even the most cruel person is just someone learning how to love. Outside, spring rain fell lightly on the window pane. The golden light of the golden spoon reflected in their eyes. Two people who were once lost in the darkness, now sitting at the same table, sharing the peace they had created together. Emily tilted her head slightly, concluding, "No one dared to touch the rude billionaire until he let someone touch his heart." Blake looked at her, his eyes gentle and deep, then laughed. "You always know how to say things that make people think, Carter." They raised their glasses of white wine, not to toast any victory, but to thank the journey they had taken. Where justice was served, faith was reborn, and two souls that were once closed off opened up to the light. The light of the golden spoon still shines brightly, not because of crystal or gold, but because there are people who dare to forgive, dare to love, and dare to start over. Life is sometimes like a giant chessboard, where every move carries the risk of loss and the opportunity of hope. Emily Carter, the small waitress who was once afraid to bow before power, chose the most difficult step, daring to raise her head. Not to challenge the world, but to protect what was right. And in that very moment, she didn't just change her own fate. She changed the heart of a man who once thought he no longer knew how to love. Jonathan Blake, the billionaire who had locked himself in a cold shell, found a way to trust again. He learned that sometimes justice is not about retaliation, but about the capacity for forgiveness. Because when we let go of hatred, light can finally enter. Their story is not just a journey of power and justice, but a journey of faith. That no matter who you are, no matter how small your starting point, courage and compassion can still create major change. Justice is not something granted by the strongest. It is born from ordinary hearts that dare to speak, dare to stand up, and dare to love. If you have ever gone through a period of feeling judged, doubted, or harmed like Emily, remember that your own steadfastness and kindness can make the world listen. What do you think of Emily's choice? If it were you, would you be willing to forgive the person who once harmed you? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. I truly want to hear your answer, because who knows, in every story you tell, there might be another light waiting to be lit. Thank you for staying until the end of the story. And I wish you, wherever you are, to find your own light. Peaceful, gentle, but strong enough to guide you through the stormy days.